I know this is a Final Fantasy 14 video, but Final Fantasy 16 has been delayed by at least 6 months. And there's obviously the quote that I'm aware of by Miyamoto saying a delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad. So I'm confused by Yoshi P's particular statement. This is unfortunately hampered communication from the Tokyo office, which in turn has led to delays in, or in extreme cases, cancellations of asset deliveries from our outsourced partners. Now, Brian, if you see this comment, how has COVID actually impacted the communication from Square-Enix themselves? And that's the part I'm confused about. Can you maybe guess? If Final Fantasy 16 already had a game development team that encompassed game developers from both Japan and all over the world, we can assume that time zones would be a major issue, but I'm also going under the assumption that Square-Enix would have known how to handle that. According to Jason Stryver, the Bloomberg video game journalist, by 2020, Final Fantasy 16 had been in development for 4 years, and they didn't even start hiring a huge lot of people until 2018 and 2019. By 2020, Square-Enix would have known how to communicate with all the game devs living in different countries. COVID wouldn't have caused a hiccup in terms of Square-Enix is creating a new company procedure to how to deal with COVID, and that would have taken a while for them to get approved by the Japanese government. But communication from Square-Enix to the 16 team wouldn't have changed pre or during COVID. So hi everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Brian. If you're new around here, I'm a software engineer by trade. That's what I do. I've run big teams and small teams, all related with various different software projects. I now work as an independent software engineer, and so Orville has asked me this question. I think I can actually provide a lot of insight for you. If you guys are returning subscribers, all that should be news that you already know. But welcome back, you sexy, beautiful holiday individuals. That's what you get for subscribing, by the way. Free random holiday compliments at the start of these videos. I feel like I can provide a lot of insight into Orville's question here, what they're proposing, and I want to break it down for you guys, give you the software engineer insight from somebody who's worked on large teams and small teams, both in independent game development and obviously bigger projects that span enterprise grade solutions. So that's the expertise that I feel like I can bring to you guys and hopefully help understand what Yoshi P is saying. I think first and foremost, let's actually dive into what Yoshi P specifically is saying. That way I can give you guys the full context of this, and then we can kind of discuss it. And if you guys have any follow-up questions, you can let me know, and hopefully this will be a really good video. And if you like it, you know what to do. Hit that like button. I think it helps out the channel. That's what I'm told by YouTube. So it is how it is. Let's see what Yoshi P exactly said to us today. Greetings everyone. When we last spoke, I promised I would have more information on Final Fantasy 16 sometime later in 2021. However, I regret to inform you that I will be unable to keep that promise as complications stemming from the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic have delayed the game's development by almost half a year. As the latest edition of Final Fantasy series has been developed for PlayStation 5, Final Fantasy 16 has amassed a sizable team composed of talented creators from all around the world. However, in an effort to offset the effects of COVID-19, we've had to decentralize that workforce by permitting staff to tackle their assignments from home. This has unfortunately hampered communication from the Tokyo office, which in turn has led to delays in, or in extreme cases, cancellations of assets deliveries from our outsourced partners. That said, I've spent much of 2021 addressing this issue, and we hope to see the impact to a minimum by the new year, allowing us to better focus in on the task at hand, increasing graphic resources qualities, refining combat mechanics, fleshing out individual battles, putting the finishing touches on cutscenes, and conducting overall graphical optimization. Our primary goal now is to be in the hands-on which the game as soon as possible in order to see it fully polished. So that leaves us with the question, when can we expect the next round of information? Well, I'm happy to announce the current plan is to conduct our next big reveal in spring 2022 as we seek to build an excitement leading up to the game's eventual release. I deeply apologize to all those who have been looking forward to learning more about 16. Thank you for your continued patience while we focus our combined efforts on development. Yoshi P. So I think that's a really good aspect and good starting point kind of for this video. So Orville really asked, like, why is this possible? They've already had the team in development and more. Within game development, it has several phases. If you kind of think of acts like you would in a play or a story, you have pre-production, you have production, and you have post-production. Pre-production kicked off, I think Yoshi P announced in 2017, 2018. And that's essentially like the core planning. I've said this multiple times. I'm going to say this like at the start of this video and hopefully not get into a rant. So we'll see. Yoshi P's true impact is going to be felt with Final Fantasy 16. And I think, and I don't know if the world's ready for it in a positive way. Yoshi P has been changing the culture and within Square-Enix for over the last 11 years based off of this hybrid, I keep saying it. My brain says analogy, agile is the word, hybrid agile development environment that he has put in place for Final Fantasy 14. Seeing his impact on Final Fantasy 14 1.0, I said that Yoshi P is going to have a profound impact on Final Fantasy as a series overall, but that won't really be felt until Final Fantasy 16. And that was actually before even Final Fantasy 15 was announced. Because things like this, what Yoshi P's been doing, take a lot of time. And it's something I recognized bright and early, right back before we even saw 2.0, is that things are really changing at Square-Enix, because you have to really think of Square-Enix pre-2010 to Square-Enix today, and it would be night and day. It's a fact that people praise Yoshi P is because it is so different to what the industry does. It is very different to what Square-Enix used to do. So note that Final Fantasy 16, I think, is going to blow your freaking mind. All right, you can hold me to that, but we'll revisit that when the game comes out. So Yoshi, but the true impact is that. So agile development requires a lot of communication and usually functions, and we're going to assume a 2-week sprint, because that's usually kind of the industry standard. You can do 3 weeks, you can actually do more, but generally you're looking at kind of a 2 to 3 week time frame of work, code checking, review, and then starting the next sprint. And when you factor that into a global company working on multiple assets, both the engine, the tools to build the game itself, the game builders, the hour assets, and more, a lot can go wrong. Like, when the bigger the team doesn't mean the faster the team. The more time that you spend on a game doesn't mean a better game. Usually a better game is actually a vision and a plan clearly focused and executed on. And that's what Yoshi P continues to show us, even with Final Fantasy 14. So Final Fantasy 16 pre-production, I bet they spent more time than they usually have spent in pre-production. And I think it's actually the right amount of time, because we've seen them announce Final Fantasy games like 15 as different games and eventually tried to save face and recover that. So ultimately, I think their time in pre-production with 16 is going to be something that pays off for a long time to come. So pre-production is one thing, and then essentially you build out your backlog. Here is everything that needs to be built. Here's everything that needs to be happen. We have a clear vision, focus, and plan going forward. And so the team works together to put that into practice. And that's where essentially then you staff up. When you add staff to a project that's already started, when things like COVID come into play, that completely changes your timetable, because even still, even with decentralization, even with I saw somebody said, if only they've heard of Slack, even with these kind of tools, they will have an impact on speed. They will have an impact on communication, because especially with Agile, it requires a ton of communication every bit of period. Here's the real aspect of it. People get sick. People get scared. People have been impacted. You and I, everybody's been impacted. So no matter what, even in the most ideal situations, COVID has impacted you, whether you feel like it did or it didn't. So like, just that's one core aspect. I know there's a COVID fatigue. I know I'm fatigued. I know the world is fatigued of hearing of it. We're ready to get past it. I don't have good news on that front. Well, like, I could give you guys my predictions if necessary, but we'll keep this focusing on video games. So when you have these teams, and let's say you have Team A, and I'm on Team A, and you have Team B, and Team B's got things that are assigned, and the things that should be finished so Team B can do their part of the work are waiting on Team A. But a core aspect gets sick in Team A. Well, no matter what, because people get sick, that's a reality. But this is a little bit different, where they can they really get sick. Team B can't start their thing, and then all of a sudden you factor in Team C and Team D, and it's all off camera. In this regards. So note that some impact where like everything's humming along like a well-oiled machine, things get done and all of a sudden everything starts coming together, and you can start really kind of tweaking and refining numbers and doing all that. But all of a sudden you end up getting these little log jams, and then that prevents other log jams. So something that might have been just a 2-week delay could actually end up equaling a 2-month delay, because then Team B can't get started on their thing, and they're sometimes sitting around waiting and rework, two of the things that are the most costly in development. In fact, I actually been working on a project. I'm not going to go too much into detail on it, but there was like 2 months where like literally no word yet from the client. I'm like, hey, we pushed this update. Any thoughts? And they were all like, yeah, we'll get back to you. And then 2 months later, they're like, hey, here's our thoughts. We're finally back to it. And it's like, well, there's 2 months that we could have had. The project probably could have been completed, but I had to go do other things. So, people don't like, paying me when I'm not working. And I mean, I get it. That's the the risk of being an independent engineer. And that's why thank you guys so much for your support this year. You made it a little bit easier for me to sit here and weather some silly client business. So, all right, that's one aspect. The other aspect is like also a delayed game. Like on that aspect, doesn't really apply as much as it did when Miyamoto said it, namely because the internet updates and especially online persistent games continue to improve over and over. And there's a lot of cases to that. I still say that his statement is true 99% of the time, and ultimately gamers do deserve that when they do deserve to finish game when it comes out. And I hope that 16 is that. And I think if Yoshi P's in charge and has his say, that's going to be what he delivers, not a 15, universe of stuff that you have to experience. I think that was them just trying to like get something out, and just the number of updates they put into 15. And I actually really enjoy 15, especially with all its updates. It still should have launched, in a better state, and hopefully 16 will, follow suit. I actually have a lot of faith that it will, being pre-production and the amount of time that they put into it before they even announced it publicly. So communication is key. Orville hit it out of the park with time zones, but then you just have to factor in the, with everything that's going on, just it's going to hit us. Like it's going to hit us because even if the starting to add resources, it's only going to slow the project down. Bigger teams don't mean faster teams. Bigger teams mean more communications necessary. And then all of a sudden, when things like this, where people start having to get distributed, where like maybe their hardware resource, they have to remote in and there's a delay in that connection. I know some servers that I got to remote into work great. Some servers that I remote into, like literally it's going to take me 30 times as long to do the, the 5-minute task. All of a sudden that 5-minute task is now an hour and a half task because the server, for whatever reason, takes a little bit longer to process, to do anything that I needed to do. So there's just a lot of, complicated factors in that. And then I've also worked with offshore resources. And so when it comes to the time zone and the communication, often our communication gets put out into the void and then it gets picked up while we're sleeping, processed, and then the response comes back to us. So depending on where these resources are located, depending on language barriers, depending on so many factors, like it's almost like you kind of hand off a football, and then essentially the next day you get a soccer ball back and you're like, okay, well, this is a little bit different. And then imagine when that happens, you got to hand back that football. You got to hand back that, oh, here's that soccer ball. Really was hoping for a football this time. Really was hoping for a baseball this time. And so just note that there's essentially kind of this, almost a game of Pong in communication. And that requires a lot more patience in that regard. So just the fact that if COVID-19, with that's impact, obviously on the world, if it's only delayed the game by 6 months, and so maybe that means we see it in the fall of 2022, I think that's thrilling. And honestly, that's a real testament to what is happening. If it goes beyond that, I think that's okay. But honestly, like he says that he wants to build up the excitement starting in the spring, I want that push to be no more than 6 months. I've said that numerous times. I from a fatiguing perspective, the biggest fatigue that I have within Square-Enix as of late, this isn't on Yoshi P or that team, but this is just overall, is when they announce these projects and then 10 years later, when they announce 7 Remake and then what was that? When I saw 7 Remake, I go, that's going to be a fun 2020 game. Turns out I was right. Still haven't had the chance to play it, and maybe I will. We will see when they decide, to do, they just brought it to PC, so maybe I'll just pick it up there. But yeah, it is how it is. Hopefully, guys, this has been informative. Like I said, I've lived in this world a lot, and so what Yoshi P saying really lines up to how I understand and how I've worked in those environments, and just that level of core impact on development overall. But I've taken enough of your time. If I didn't answer any question, or if there's more information you want, let me know, and I'll try to answer in the comments or maybe in a follow-up video, one way or the other. Guys, thanks for being here. Love you faces. Hopefully I'll see you in my next video, but until then, take care.
I just want to say I'm really glad you're feeling better, and I love the videos. Well, I love you too. Michelle? Shoot for the moon, and so even if you fail, you'll reach the stars. Go for the 100K subscribers. Yeah.